Well, this is in response to about 1,000 questions that I've received recently, especially now that it's gotten hot, about how I water. Well, I do have an in-ground irrigation system, but I don't rely on it as heavily as you might think. Usually I only put it on automatic when I'm out of town, and I'm home right now. Even though it's hot, I still don't have it turned on. I will only turn it on a manual basis. Right now, you may be asking, okay, does that mean you hand water all of this stuff? Well, yes and no. So let me start out by just showing you, in terms of hand watering, what my setup is and how I kind of think about it. So I've got one of these, I think it's a, what is it? What brand is this? This is a Suncast hose holder. And you can see that it's got a lever on it that I can just roll it up pretty easily and unwind it as I use the hose. And then my spigot is just underneath the window box on the back of the house. So I also like to use, and I think most of the time I've gotten these from Gardener's Supply, I like using these handheld sprayers where easily with your thumb you can on and off the flow. I can also change the flow to a stream or to a hard jet or whatever. Now the reason I really like this is not only because it's especially wonderful if you have arthritis or you have difficulty with your hand and thumb movements, but also because I can easily turn it on and off so I'm not wasting water in between as I'm moving from one area of the garden to another area. So let me show you what I mean. And I'm also going to make a distinction. This is another way that I kind of think of the outdoors as just like rooms in my house. I have two categories of potted plants, maybe three, but the two I'm going to talk about today are ones that I call furniture and ones that I call throw pillows. So the furniture, those are the ones that are in really large, massive concrete pots. Most of the time they're evergreens. They stay outside year round. I don't have to move them in and out of the greenhouse. And because they're in such large pots and most of them are established, they don't take nearly as much water. So I don't have to water them a lot. But the throw pillows, those things that flower, that are in pots that are a little bit smaller, those require a lot more attention, and as temperatures skyrocket, their watering needs skyrocket as well. So those are kind of my two different categories that helps me know how much I'm going to need to water them. Now, about once a week, I water everything really, really deeply, hand watering it. But on a daily basis, this is what I do. So I start out, this is a wonderful, it's part of an Italian line of hoses that comes from Gardener's Supply. And I start out in the area that's farthest away, and I'm not sure exactly how long this hose is, but it's a really long hose. And I do that because the hose doesn't kink then as I get closer to the house. It straightens it out. There's no curves. There's no kinking. So you can see I've gotten all the way to the back of my garden. I use another hose. Stuart, if you can see that one there, I've got laid out. I use another hose for the potager. But this one is so easily put away. I can roll it up and I can contain it pretty easily. So this is one of the plants that I think of as a furniture plant. So I only water it maybe twice a week, and I water it pretty deeply, but on a daily basis I don't have to water it at all. So basically what I'm watering here are what I call the throw pillow plants. The flowers, or the things that are going to flower. I might water that because I just newly planted it. Now notice that I can turn it off in between each plant, so I'm not wasting any water. I've got a couple of potted plants down here. This plant was recently installed, so I'm going to give it a little bit more water. You'll notice if I want to make sure that it gets all the way to the root ball, which is what's most important, I can do concentrated watering. Then I put it back where it was. If I need to water something in the distance, this jet is great. Typically, I wouldn't have to water this. Okay, now I'm going to move over here. I've got these 2 baskets that need lots of water. And I'm really going to make sure that I get down at the root zone of these pots. These are actually plastic pots that are set inside these baskets. Then on a lot of plants, it's best that you not overhead water because that can induce fungal problems. But number one, I always water in the morning so there's a chance for the foliage to dry before the sun gets too high in the sky and the foliage burns, and also so that it can dry off and alleviate any kind of fungal problems. Now, some I do intentionally overhead water because it helps mitigate any problems with pests. It will knock off spider mites, aphids, any other kinds of things that might become problematic. And then if anything that's growing in the ground looks like it's suffering or in distress, I can give it an extra drink of water. But I don't unless I think it really needs it. So then I'm going to do this pot. And by the way, this is a wonderful scented geranium. And when I water it, it infuses the air with its scent. So I love that. This is also what I would consider to be a furniture plant that normally wouldn't get a lot of attention from me, but I haven't watered it in a while. These are smaller topiaries, and obviously any kind of topiaries or anything that are in small pots, those need to be watered much more frequently. It's also one of the reasons that I put gravel on the surface of the pots, because I want to make sure that that water doesn't wick away real quickly. Another thing, if temperatures are high and if conditions are extremely windy, then you're going to have to water more. And it's best that you hand water, because any kind of sprinkling system, all of that water will just evaporate away and it won't reach the targeted areas. So you do have to water more in a windy environment. Here are some more topiaries whose leaves are a little bit browned. And again, that's because of the high wind we had the other day. This little table here has a lip on it. And to create a moist environment, a humid environment, and it hasn't really attracted mosquitoes or anything, I sometimes will add extra water, because the tray effect increases the humidity, and all of these really want pretty much water, even the rosemary, because they're in smaller pots. Okay, Stuart, if you'll follow me over here without tripping on the hose. So back in here, I just recently planted some Dahlia tubers. So I'm going to give them, and this would be true also if I had seeded anything in this area. Let's say I'd seeded some zinnias or something, then I want to keep this moist. Sometimes, especially if they're seedlings, I might do this multiple times a day. Then I've got some pots over here. This is when it's helpful to have a jet. If it's a hard to reach area, I can still get to the root zone by putting this on kind of a hard jet. These were hydrangeas that were in full bloom, but I want to contain their growth, so I've cut them back some. Okay, over in here, I also consider these to be furniture plants, these boxwoods in these pots, but I've got some thyme that I planted around the perimeter and I want it to get established, so I'm going to give it a little bit more water. Now I'm going to show you on these topiaries, I'm going to show you another way because they require a lot of moisture. I'm going to show you another way that I deep water them once a week. And on these pots, I wait till it pretty much runs out the bottom. Okay, here's another furniture plant. And I'm showing you all of this because I want you to not only get an idea of how I water my plants, but also approximately how long it takes. I've got some newly planted hydrangeas back in here. Again, I can focus at the root zone, and I will do this every day until I feel that they're pretty well established. Then I potted up this boxwood not too long ago. It's still getting established in the pot, so even though it's a furniture plant, I'll water it today as well. Now, because I use so many pots that are located back in the garden beds, I just have to kind of remember where they are, and I don't have to bend or anything. I can use the jet end of my hose to make sure that they get a really deep water, and it's right at the root zone. Very little foliar contact. The rest of this area doesn't require a lot of water, and about once or twice a week when I decide to use the in-ground irrigation system, this will all get watered with a combination of a drip line and a mist head system. So over here, that is a furniture plant. This is a furniture plant. This is a small furniture plant. That is a furniture plant. But this up here is a big throw pillow. And because it's elevated, it's subject to high wind all of the time. So I really make sure that it is deeply watered around the perimeter, not just in one section, but all around it. Believe it or not, these lavenders need more water than you would think. So I hydrate them pretty well. Now I've got 2 Oakland hollies that are on the perimeter of this little porch on either end. I hardly ever water these evergreens because they just don't need it. They don't get a ton of light. They're in huge pots, so I don't have to water them very often. Now, sometimes though, these are the pots you want to pay most attention to, because since I hardly ever water them, all of a sudden they will look kind of limp and dry, and I'll realize I haven't watered them in so long that they really need a good deep soak. So over here, same thing. There's a topiary there. There's a pot here that's got some dahlias in it. And again, I do this all in the morning, usually in my pajamas. All of these I consider to be throw pillows. And because they flower so abundantly, they really need pretty much water. Now, because these flower abundantly and because I'm watering them a lot, it means they have to be fed more often. Okay, these large boxwoods, I also consider to be furniture plants. I don't water them very often. Even the small boxwoods I don't water a lot. There's an Elysium back in there. This huge euonymus hardly ever gets watered. These ferns I only water about once every 3 days. Now, the thing is, all of this may think, okay, how do you remember all of this? you know your own garden. You know which things need more water. You know which plants in your landscape get a lot of sun, and which ones are going to dry out. And you can do some things then to help prevent them drying out. You can move the pots. You can plant them, repot them into a larger pot if necessary that can hold more water. You can put them in the shade. There's different things that you can do. So then in the bistro area over here, I've got some lemon cypress. And I don't worry too much about, I don't consider it wasted water if it gets around the pot itself, because that provides residual and ambient humidity for the plant itself. That's not necessarily a bad thing. So I don't, if I'm not extremely careful in my targeting, I don't worry about it too much. And pretty much these, for the most part, I only water sporadically. So that does it. I guess I need to water these guys over here. This is also one of those tray tables. If I've just planted anything, or if it's been repotted, then I will give it a lot more watering attention. And I need to give some attention to my bird bath. But that's how I have done this entire area. But come over here, I want to show you one other thing. This would have taken me even less time, except that I'm talking to you guys. About once every 2 weeks, I get a really big bucket and I fill it all the way to the top with water and some liquid organic plant food. I don't have the bottle to show you, but usually I'll use Espoma or any kind of liquid organic. And then I take my smaller pots, especially my topiaries, and I completely submerge them. And the myrtles, because they really like water, I'll even leave them in here for a while until there's no air bubbles at all that come up from the pot. You can still see a few air bubbles over there, I think. Then I know it's been completely saturated. They are fed, they're happy, and I put them back in place. And I do this about once every couple of weeks. I do it with my myrtle topiaries. I do it with my boxwoods, my smaller potted plants. And it really doesn't take that much time. It's just whenever I'm strolling through the garden, I just switch out one pot for another. So there are some ideas for you on how to water your plants. It doesn't take as much time as you think. I actually find it really nice because I do it in the morning when the birds are out. It's still cool. I don't consider it to be much of a chore. I really kind of enjoy it. And I find it kind of a pleasant activity, and the water itself kind of keeps you cool. So in answer to your question, do I hand water all of these plants? Hopefully that addressed that issue. And if you say, oh gosh, you just have way too many potted plants, that takes so much time, yes it may. But remember, this is what I do. This is my job. This is what I love. If I worked in an office or I worked at a different kind of occupation, I'd be spending all my time doing that. This is my workplace, and so I don't really think of it as any kind of onerous activity at all. I really enjoy it, and I try to be as water efficient as I can about it, which is why all the gravel is on top of all of the pots. But I enjoy it, the birds enjoy it, the pollinators enjoy it, and hopefully you enjoyed this too. So until next time, get your hose out.